That's no advantage.
I guess you miss it when you don't have it. So, can you hear me okay over here?
Pardon me?
Okay, I'll sit right here so you can hear me better.
Okay.
Is that okay? Okay, I think it's working. So, I mean, all those years ago, when we had all those conversations over the phone, I can't find those tapes anymore.
Oh, yeah?
And so I wanted to just have a chance to sit with you and get on video your, a bit of your story about the things that you've experienced. We are, the movie's still kind of moving along slowly, and someday maybe we'll take the opportunity to write more about you. But it felt important to try and just get, what we could.
Yeah, well, no sense in writing any more about me, but if you talk to me, I probably couldn't give you any more anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think hearing your story, from the very beginning, it was one of those where I didn't know the story, even, being Arnie's grandson. And hearing a lot about Arnie, it was so fascinating for me to hear, hear what you experienced in your story as well. The one thing I don't know, I don't think I know much about is your youth, your younger years.
Yeah.
Elementary and high school, what it was like to grow up downtown Ogden.
Yeah, well, it was quite different, I guess, because of the war coming and getting here about that time. But my growing up time was just going to school and having fun with the kids and learning, and that was my main objective, I guess, because I've bragged to a lot of people already about it, but I went through school without missing a day, In fact, I got a certificate at the end of high school saying that I went through the grade system without missing a day, and the teacher thought that was neat, but he says, if I'd only known, about how important the school was and so on, he says, I'd have paid more attention and given you all A's instead of whatever because back in those days, a lot of the teachers didn't keep any records and so on, and so when end of the year came by, they just say, let's see, what was he a good student or wasn't he? Just put down whatever they guess. But some a lot of the other teachers, they're real meticulous about keeping records, that they were there every day and so on, and that was my big thing, was not to miss a day, and the big thing was that as I went to school, I walked along Grand Avenue due north, right at Mount Ben Lomond, and that mountain was just imprinted on my memory, and fall, winter, spring, that was just my picture, going to school and walking to my favorite mountain, and so Ben Lomond, it was not part of Ogden, it seemed like.
Yeah.
But it really, a left an imprint on me, and I guess a lot of the other kids too that had to go north to go to the mountain. And it just so happened that the street I was going to came right at that mountain, and that stayed with me all the way through school, even up through the university and so on. And that little jog in the mountains there, where Ben Lomond just sticks out past Mount Ogden and the rest, and you got the mountains on this side and Ben Lomond facing you, and then drops off to the Salt Lake, the lake.
When you see that, does it feel like home to you?
What?
When you see Ben Lomond, does that
feel
like home?
And in later years, way later, and I think in the university, their new department there about the art, they have a big painting of Ben Lomond, and there's further deals where that mountain was the basis for what, United Artists or something that have that. That's their trademark. And so I said, well, see there, the mountain's famous. But
back then, did they talk about how it had a smile on it, a face on it?
Oh no, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, when it snows in the winter, there's a ridge that has a smile and two little spots that kind of looks like a smiley face.
Yeah.
I didn't know, like when I was younger, we talked about the smile on the mountain. I didn't know if that was a tradition that existed when you were there. Did you set out to be a good student? Was that something that was important to you as a child?
Yeah, it was. I don't know how come, but it must have been there. Must have been because I made it a point that I wouldn't miss a day, and it came through. And they actually kept records back in those days. And when I finished Ogden High School, they gave me a certificate. I don't know how many kids got them, but they gave me a certificate saying that I went through 12 years and perfect attendance and all that stuff.
That's remarkable.
I don't think my kids do that in a semester these days.
And a lot of these teachers, they didn't even keep track, and at the end of the year, I guess they'd go and just go mark the days, and if they remembered that during the flu season, this kid was out for a couple of days or something, but I didn't mark that down, I guess. But it was no big deal, except to me. I thought it was a big deal.
Do you remember getting like any bad scores on tests or anything like that, or were you the kid that was like you had to have, if you got an A-, it wasn't quite good enough?
No. I tried to do my best, and I was lucky. Because all you need to do is pay attention, and so I did pretty good in the grades, and back in those days, early on, a lot of the teachers didn't even keep records, that you were there, let alone whether you did well or what, and you're lucky to have marks down there that showed that you passed, So it was no big deal, except for me personally, and other people didn't care, and that was okay with me because it didn't matter to them.
What stuff did you do for fun?
can remember is trying to scrounge up things to have fun with. You know, like in the beginning, I'd see these kids playing marbles, you know, and so I said, how do I get a hold of a marble, you know? And they said, well, look around, see, what the guys are playing is sometimes you can find some old chipped ones that have been thrown away and stuff, and so that's where I started, is looking for marbles in the throwaway bins and stuff. Not bins, but just out in the dirt, because that's all we had out there was dirt filled with chunks of gravel and asphalt and pebbles and whatnot. And yeah, the alleyways in Ogden weren't exactly a thing of beauty, you know. But yeah, you know, when you walk back there, you have to be careful, because every once in a while you catch a half-full beer bottle just flying through the air, you know, where some drunk had decided that he'd had enough and whatnot. That's an experience that not many kids had.
Good thing you were fast.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. And then we were rich enough for, I don't know how the heck I got a tricycle. It wasn't mine, but I ended up using it. And then after a while, well, it was after I started, I was 12 or 13 or so, when I started working for my cousin out on 2nd Street. And my season was, it started the day after Memorial Day, and it ended on the day after what's the one in September?
Labor Day.
Labor Day.
Yeah.
I mean that was a school year, Memorial Day to Labor Day, and everybody, you know, from first grade right on up through school, that was the school year. You knew when school started and when it ended, and of course all of the holidays were on the calendar, so you knew what days you were supposed to be in school, you know, years ahead if you wanted to look at a calendar.
Yeah.
But you know, it was fun, because unlike the way it is now, where you know your schoolmates change every so many days, weeks, months. But you know, back in those days, you had the same kids in your class or most of them, nearly all of them, for the whole year, or the whole grade school, and so on. It's almost like a big family, you know. Except we're in grad school down in the slums area, where you had all of the different nationalities that went together. You know, a lot of the kids when we started school couldn't speak English, and so when you went to the first grade, wasn't sure that the kid next to you could speak English, or you could talk to him. In fact, I wasn't too fluent myself, I guess, when I was in the first grade. But I had a Japanese neighbor that had kids that were older than our family, and they were pretty good students because they had a blackboard there in their front room, and so whenever I go over there to visit, that's a thing that I could find the kids at, over at the blackboard where they'd be learning how to write or whatnot, and the parents would borrow books or something so that the kids had something to read and do other things besides schoolwork, so their kids really set a good example for us. My family wasn't that literate.
You mentioned that there were a lot of kids there who didn't speak English. Were a lot of them Japanese, of Japanese descent? Was there Japanese community down there?
Yeah, there was, but
were there other nationalities as well?
Yeah. I guess mainly Mexican, I think.
Is that right?
But I think still it was mixed nationalities, but all American. Like you get. Well, let's see. I had Pete Remmers. He was the best athlete in our little group. He was Mexican, and there's two other kids. They were both English, but from different parts of England, I think.
Oh, uh-huh.
And me. So we had them from all over the globe.
Yeah.
And I was not exactly typical, but pretty much so. Because Grand Avenue, that's down in the slums, just next to the railroad tracks, and so even the Caucasian people, most of them, their parents were laborers, and a lot of them worked for the railroad and lived right there close to, because they didn't have cars anyway. You got to be close to your working place or spend a lot of time in your life just going from work to home and back. But it was a fun life. Now that you look back on it, it was pretty scratch out your living, and I don't know why I never worried about food on the table. My parents probably did, but my teeth were bad because never drank milk. I didn't. When my brothers started coming along, I guess. See, my mother got to the U.S. Well, she got to the U.S. A year before, a calendar year before I was born, and of course, and she never worked until after my dad died, and that was when I was in the 9th grade. But she was always busy at home making clothes and mending clothes and stuff like that, because that's what we wore, is what she she had an old treadmill singer machine, and that thing was going all the time. She kept it in good shape because I know after she died, I sold it to one of our church members, and they used it, but they kind of got it because it was an antique.
Yeah.
An old singer, and you know where you
push it back and forth.
You run it with your feet, and that's what she did until after my dad died. And I probably told you the story about that, where he passed away, and the next day or so after that, she called me into the kitchen where there was a nice round table where we could sit there and use it as a meeting and everything else. But he says, says, I don't have a job. So I was thinking that I think that if I can get you kids together and we could go back to Japan and I think live with our parents, my parents, because in Japan, like a lot of these old countries, the house is owned by the senior family member, and when the senior and the owner of the house passes on, then the next guy, whether he's next year in the age or half a year down the line and all, it's the oldest son gets to take over the building, and if you've got a large family, they add on or I don't know how they keep it so that the house will serve the whole family, but I imagine that they had some families that would be big enough where they have to cut out younger ones or whatever. Anyway, it just so happened that the house back in Japan was kind of owned by, I guess it was my mother's brother, oldest brother, who happened to be the oldest boy when whoever preceded them passed on, and so then he became the leader of the house and so on. And it's I guess it's an old, I think a lot of the countries have the same sort of hierarchy and so on, and they have the same problems, and like the oldest son, of course he gets married and starts raising a family and so on, and his wife learns that she has all this power now, and so if there's more people there than she thinks is necessary, well then they call it out, and so if you're further on down the line, you sometimes have to go find someplace to live, you know, and it's I've heard that story from different people, you know, and so it's not anything new, I guess.
So how did you respond when your mom said, "Let's head back to Japan"?
I said, yeah. I was kind of thinking of that. So I says, if you want, I said, you take Tats and Oscar and I don't know, I don't have any money to help you, but whatever, and you can take them and go back home and probably with the help of the family there, you'll be okay. I said, but I'm staying. I was in the ninth grade.
Yeah. Oh, well, that must have been terrifying. I mean, you're a teenager, you have friends.
Yeah.
You know, this is the only place you've ever known, and thinking of going back to Japan, that must have been really scary. Yeah. And she
I got a feeling I've told this story before. You go, I told you guys this story.
Yeah. I think you mentioned it before. I find it really interesting. But I also think it's interesting that she decided to stay after that. She didn't want to leave you, you know?
Yeah.
She wanted to...
Well, she didn't argue about it. She was pretty sure that she's going to not change my mind, and she was pretty sure that she didn't want to split the family up either, and she didn't know whether she's going to be able to make it, but that little old gal, she had a lot of gumption, you know. She didn't have a job, never did work.
Right.
So I don't know, and I'm sure that we didn't have any savings in the bank to speak of. So it must have been, you got 3 kids, oldest one in the ninth grade, no money, no place to live. It must have been quite a bleak outlook there for her.
Yeah.
But
I
I think she was smiling. I don't know where she got all that toughness, but she never did raise her voice much either. You know, she's a mild, gentle lady. So whenever I think about her, I really take my hat off to her. You know, you're in a foreign country, you and 3 kids. You don't have a car, you don't have a bankroll.
Did she live there until she passed away?
What?
Did she live there until she passed away? Or did she eventually move?
Yeah.
Did she? Okay.
Yeah, she stayed there because, you know, we lived in the back and in the basement.
Yeah.
And she was kind of a chubby gal, you know, not very tall. And she never raised her voice. And it just always makes me sad when I think about her, because I really didn't appreciate her like I should have. I was always worried about myself and worried about and you know, and had a lot of pride in thinking that hey, Wat, he can take care of himself, and so I wasn't thinking about my family. I was just thinking about myself, and she and my brothers. They did okay because it's about that time when I was needing extra money, I always could get fed here at home.
Yeah.
Nothing like steak and pork chops, but hell, I never was on any kind of starvation rations. She always had lots of rice. And that's. There was a bin pulled down like that would take just maybe a sack and a half if you wanted to fill it up that much, but that's what we keep rice, and that's what we ate out of mainly. We'd have rice. When I was younger, I don't know how old I was before I started drinking milk or something. That's why my teeth are bad, But always had a full belly,
That's good.
She always had enough food for me, and
yeah. And she just picked up the barber scissors.
Yeah,
and taught herself how to be a barber.
This guy we knew had a shop down in a depot, which was just a block, just straight down the street, and he lived up where Harrison is. He lived a block. What is that, Van Buren or something like that, and around. I had a friend of mine that lived up around there too, but it was around 24th and Van Buren, somewhere up around there. And he'd catch the bus, come down, and he'd get off at Washington and 25th, and walk the 3 blocks down to the depot and do his business. He was I think there were a couple of other barbers there, but he was the number one guy. And so he got acquainted with my dad. So when he passed on, he stopped by and talked to us and to see what he could do to help. And he suggested that if he wanted to, he could teach you how to cut hair and shave and stuff like that.
Wow.
And so we took him up on that, and my mom knew a little bit about that, but she had to learn about, especially about shaving people,
Yeah.
And what's that? Shaving a haircut 2 bits.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's.
And she picked it up fast, and that's what she did to support you.
She wasn't very big. I mean, she was a little chubby, but short like most Japanese ladies were.
So she had to lower the chair down far. Did she have like a little stool or something that she would stand on?
Huh?
Did she have like
No,
she would just
think it'd be good enough for. And of course, when you give them a shave, you lay them down, so there's just at your chest level, just right,
Yeah. And what was the barber shop called?
I think Western.
Yeah. The Western?
Western Barbershop. I think that was it.
Which,
That-
yeah.
that-
You're in the West.
And we had that barber pole
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, and I don't know where it is now, but the wire things, the connection still coming out of the brick
Oh,
wall
really?
between the two places. There was a, well, I don't know, they sold ice cream and beer and milk and a few groceries on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And then next to that, what was it? See, my landlord, he owned quite a bit of property. He's an old Russian immigrant, and his son was pretty old, and so I think his son, at least in the beginning, did most of the bookkeeping, all of that. But the old man was the brains of the outfit, and the next to that, there was a kind of, well, they ran a kind of a grocery store, plus keep track of their property. I don't know how many places that he owned, but I was trying to think. I think it was $50 was our rent, and that took care of the water too.
And
And
so,
we had to pay for or did he pay for the coal? Because that's what we had. That was what it was. What heat was. We had a
little chute or a little stove?
no, it was one of those. You've seen them in Ogden, where in the sidewalk, with you get these double door things come up and little platform comes up and then you can wheel your whatever you deliver there and
go back down.
Well, we had one in the back, and it was right on the platform coming out of the back door. And right below that, all there was a hole, and lined with good sheet metal, and that's where they dumped the blocks of coal down there. And then you had a double door with a bar across there, that you lift up and open the doors and go get your. Because before they'd show they'd come in all sizes, I guess, but the main size was like you've seen these sheet of ice that they used to have, about yay thick and what that deep and what this long. Yeah, that's about the size of the coal that they brought. Anyway, they dumped that coal down in the middle, and that's all we had down in the shed there under the deal. And that room was about the squares from here to there back. And so we'd open the door and take the bars down from the deals to open it up, and we just take the coal out and put it in a chute and take a sledge and break it up so that you could feed the furnace. And that was one of my jobs was to make sure when I was there, to make sure that that the fire was going, and we had hot water in a boiler, and and then there was from the, I don't know if I told all you.
No, this is all new to me.
But anyway, the back end of the basement had a floor on it, and of course I could we take the coal and bring it out and get a sledge and break it up and put it in a bin or something that's closer to the furnace. I guess the furnace was maybe almost about halfway the distance from here to the door, away from the back door where the coal came down, and that was right next to the back door, and that's all there was in that. It was a square hole where they dropped the coal down through. And anyway, so that was when I was old enough. Of course, in the beginning I couldn't do that, but I'd go down and break these coals that hadn't been broken because of the handling and so on, and keep it in a separate bin that's between the stove and the shed, and make sure that they had cold air, and of course there was and all there was just a regular, well, there's maybe a little bit bigger than regular tank, where you feel and see do we have enough hot water or not? Because besides the barbering, we had 2 rooms in behind where the cut hair were these guys, because we had a lot of the guys that lived around there that worked in the railroad shops that were just a block away, you know, and some of them would come and take a bath and stuff after on the way home from work, so that when they got home they were nice and clean and ready for supper or whatever it is, and that's what we did. I think my dad charged them 2 bits for a shot. So you get, for 2 bits you get hot water that you could use and soap that you need and towels that you can wash and dry yourself off with.
Yeah.
And so some of these guys would make it a regular deal to, but you know, I don't know where they work, but we didn't have many customers that would come every day. You know, so they would either bathe someplace else, or their whatever work they did wasn't, you know, dirty, grimy work, so that they didn't have to bathe every day.
Yeah.
But anyway, boy, that's going back
so
a long ways.
Is it weird to go to the sushi restaurant that's there now? Is it strange to walk into this place and get some food, and it's also the place where you grew up?
Yeah, well, see, all those buildings were double. And there was a stairway that went in between, like on the east side of our barbershop was the stairway that went up, and it was one of those where you had a landing, and you go up, and the hotel office was the first room at the top of the stairs and that kind of stuff. And there was a place for a kitchen and all that stuff. That was way in the back. That was 2 places wide, like our place, and we had not a jewelry store, but they sold, that kind of stuff, jewelry and watches and stuff like that. Next door, on the other side was a small tavern, that had a bar in there, and you could go buy a stein of beer or something if you want. And then there was a grocery store next to that. And then on the corner was they sold milk, and they had a soda fountain like there.
Oh, yeah.
You could get milkshakes and stuff like that. And, they also had kind of a small grocery store that sold, the normal things like milk and stuff like that. That was on the corner. And yeah, you could go get a nice milkshake or a triple decker or whatever,
Yeah. What was above you?
Well, let's see. I guess above me was a hotel, and it was 2
Wide?
twice as wide as the places downstairs, and the stairway to go up was in between there, and it happened to be on the east side of our place. So on the wall on the west side was our barber pole, and then there was this stairway that had a landing kind of halfway up. And then there was a jewelry store or something like that. They had funny assortment of goods to sell, but it was a shop that was the other half wide.
On the landing?
No, there was no landing going up to the second floor. It was just straight shot up. But the stairway going up, I guess it was twice as wide. Or was it?
I'll have to go down there. I kind of want to go down there and just look around and see all the things that are there. And there's people that talk about, you lived in the basement, and people talk about how there were tunnels underneath the street. Is that true? Did you, were they connected together?
I think so. In fact, I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
But I was never privy to go in there. In fact, that's a long ways to go underground from one side of the street to the other. To 25th Street is, you got parking and 2 lanes of traffic, and same way on the other side, and a wide sidewalk.
Yeah.
So from face of the building to the face of the building on the other side, you had to wind up and really heave a snowball to get it across there.
Yeah.
But and I went through. I think it was junior high school when these people moved in, and there was a hotel that their folks bought or whatever directly across the street, and there was two kids that was both of them were younger than me, but they were older than Tats, and both male that went to school, and we were friends, but not marble playing buddies or anything like that. But they lived across the streets, a long ways across, like 25th Street, because you got parking and double deals, and in the beginning they used to have streetcar tracks.
Oh yeah.
I don't know when they took those out, but that was a nuisance, for them.
Yeah.
But,
so, and the ladies of the night, because there were some places down there. I don't know if they were called brothels or if they were just unofficially brothels, but that was just part of the atmosphere at the time.
Yeah. Well, not every place was like that. Some were like, I'd say my friends, my father knew them, and of course we got to know them afterwards. But this guy is a Japanese couple, and the guy had a job, and so he'd go out every day, and the mother would take care of the hotel, and they had ended up with 3 kids that they were raising, and it was funny. They were more about the same age as my brother Tats and younger, so I was. And they were they had 3 kids too, so that makes 6 of us. But I was the oldest one by 4, over all of those, and so, and they were Buddhist, and so was my mom. So for Christmas time, it was pretty sad around there, and I remember. When I was a little older, I don't know where I got the money, but I remember one Christmas I bought a bunch of those big little books. I don't know if they were about that thick and about that square. And all the kids would use those, Mickey Mouse and all these other things like that. And anyway, I think I bought 3 different kinds for the 3 kids, 2 guys and 1 girl.
Yeah.
And I gave that to them for their Christmas present. And the thing was that they went to a Buddhist church, and so did my brothers, and so did. But that was the only Christmas present they got, was a big little book. I think they cost 10 cents or something.
Yeah. You were Santa Claus.
Not that thick,
That's pretty great. It sounds like it was a really eclectic place to grow up. Did you feel like an outsider? Did people treat you like you were different?
No, most people didn't know where the hell I lived. Because especially during the day, during business hours, we were going in and out of the house. We go out the back, never go out the front. And of course, my dad was doing all the business he could, but there was more than half the time when he didn't have any customers in the shop, and so he had the habit of walking up and down the steps of the street, and he says, I want to remind you guys that when you're walking around the street, says, don't walk with your head up. Says, you keep your eye on the street, because, well, he says, I found 25 cents today. And so they find, coins that people have dropped or something, and rolled away, because all of the sidewalks slope down to the gutter, and there was nearly always water. That was the thing about Ogden that I appreciated, that their streets were pretty clean. Even down there in the slums area, well, like my dad, he didn't have enough customers to keep inside the shop all day long, so he'd always be out there sweeping the streets, because there's some of these guys that throw their butts on the street and just step on it and go on. He'd just make sure that was all clear, nice and clean, and people wouldn't be carrying it on their soles of their shoes if their customers came inside and all that. Anyway, there was more business in the back alleys than there was on the front. Seems like you only had to be careful. Every once in a while, you'd have to duck an empty beer bottle or something. Because some of these, when they got busy where they could use more room than what was inside, they'd build because their property went out to the middle of the alleyway, which is about like from here to the front door or a little bit bigger, and they'd have an extension of their drinking places, So.
And do you think they were just throwing that at you because you were there, or maybe because you didn't look like they looked?
There was what?
Why do you think they threw the beer bottle? Was it because you were just there, or maybe because you were a Japanese kid?
They weren't throwing it at me because there's a 6-high.
Oh, the beer bottle would just come flying over.
No, because it's too much trouble to walk over to the wastebasket or whatever it was.
Yeah. I remember one time you were telling me about a story where you were at the butcher or a market and you were waiting in line like everybody else, and you got up there and you were like, can I have some pork chops or whatever it was you were ordering? And the butcher just ignored you and started talking to the lady behind you. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that happened every once in a while, because in the beginning, my head was lower than the counter.
Yeah.
So, you'd be next in line, you stand up there and the counter's taller than you are. The guy's not ignoring you on purpose, but he just sees, and obviously the person behind you is the one that has the money, so that's who he's going to talk to. But I wasn't ignored many times, because usually there weren't that many people in line. A lot of times when you go there, you're the only one in line.
Yeah. At what point did you start noticing people maybe would treat you differently? Seems like in elementary school, it was a really, there are a lot of people, Russians and, people from Mexico, people from Japan. But at least by the time you got to the University of Utah, the majority of people there were, they were white kids. Was there a point where you started to realize maybe that people noticed that you weren't, noticed that you maybe were different than them?
Oh, Yeah, I noticed that right from the beginning when I was in the grade school. So, in fact, my three buddies, they were always close by in order to give me a hand if I got into any trouble. And so,
what were their names?
Well, Pete Ramirez and Frank Horspool and Lee Draney.
Yeah. Horspool's a great name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were your friends through high school? Or is that elementary school?
Yeah, no. Yeah, we went through 12 years together.
Wow.
In fact, these guys would get embarrassed because this one kid, he particularly had problems with math. And there was one day when in the physics class, this was when we were in high school, and the teacher told him, says, Frank, he says, seems like some of the people had problems with the lesson last night or yesterday or whatever it was. So he says, would you please, get your notes and come and put the problem on the board. Well, he kind of paled because he didn't have it. And the guy says, hey, he says, so somebody grabbed my notebook and slipped it to him, and he took that and he copied it word for word on the board. He didn't know what he was writing. He was in big trouble. And I think maybe, those teachers aren't stupid. I think he knew what was going on. So he didn't approve of it, but he didn't want to embarrass Frank too much. He was the shortest guy in our group. He was even shorter than me.
So, did they play basketball? In high school, you won the state championship, right? Was that in 34? When was that?
Well, 44 was the year they won.
No, 30. In high school, what was it?
39.
I graduated in 41.
So maybe 41 or 40?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Was it a big deal? Like these days, when high school plays, hundreds of kids come to the gym and cheer them on. Was it like that back then?
Oh, yeah. Well, the high school championship was played in Salt Lake. So, it was vacation time. The kids that could afford it or could get rides, I felt sorry for some of these out of town kids. Some of them were from St. George, because all of the schools played at high school. There wasn't, the gradations that they have now. But I know that Dixie used to be pretty strong back in those days.
Yeah.
And so they would always bring a contingent up, and the rich kids, folks that have to supply the travel. They'd drive up here from St. George.
Yeah.
That was a big holiday, that basketball tournament.
Yeah. And so in high school, these days, my son's in 9th grade and he's, starting to be interested in girls and dating people. Were you dating people at the time, or were you so focused on school and life that you didn't have time for the ladies?
I was noticing the girls, but I didn't have any money to buy them a milkshake or anything like that. And so I kind of kept my distance most of the way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, kids used to have a good time.
Mm-hmm. And when did you meet Katie?
Well, she was born and raised in Lima, Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
and they were the only Japanese family. Katie and her brother Carl
Yeah.
and mother and father.
Mm-hmm.
But Carl moved to Salt Lake early, but Katie was still a junior, so she didn't come out here until after she graduated, which was the following year.
Yeah.
And I'm this gal that knew me. She had a job being secretary to one of those. Third, fourth, like on the corner of Fifth and Third West, Fourth West.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big building, and mainly it was. They dealt in cowhides and that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
so that area down there was pretty smelly. You know, that I don't know what kind of chemical it is there, but it's pretty strong. But Katie had she didn't know her before then, but she was looking for a job, and this gal says that there's a place open, where she works there down there where it is, and so Katie applied and got a job, and so anyways, I don't know if it was a Saturday. I think it was a Saturday. Back in those days we worked on Saturdays, half a day. But this gal knew this guy that I had met when I moved to Salt Lake, and he played tennis, and so I'd go find me a racket at a place and go play with him once in a while. And so anyway, we had a date to go play tennis out at what's that park there on 4th South and 3rd West.
I don't know.
Kind of came across the street from the Greek Orthodox Church.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Anyway, they had I think 2 sets of courts out there, outdoor, and this gal knew that this friend of mine that I went to play tennis with had a date to knock the ball around a little bit. Because that's all I did in tennis. Cause I never did have any equipment, And anyway, so Katie was just getting a job, and so this gal told her, come on, says, I want you to meet this guy.
Yeah.
He says, you're new in this town, So they came down during her lunch hour, and we were just, just knocking the ball around. We weren't playing anything, we were just knocking the ball around. And that's when I first met her. And I really don't remember much about her, because I didn't know that they were coming, and I was more interested in playing a little tennis, and I was meeting somebody new. But that's how I met her.
And how you were in college at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that after the war, or
No.
before?
That was before I went. So that was after she got out of high school. And that was before I went into the service.
Yeah.
I graduated, so it was after 1941, because that's when I graduated from high school.
Mm-hmm.
So it had to be 42 or 43.
And what year did you get married?
Huh?
What year did you get married?
Oh, I ought to know that. Yeah, when did I get married? Seems like, just like they say, seems like I've been married forever.
I can find that one out, I bet.
Yeah, well, she was a different kind of a gal. I'd never met a Japanese person that had lived with Caucasians all their life. You know, so she was a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of liked her right away because she's an intelligent gal and interesting and smart.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Ambitious, yeah. She was.
She was a great lady.
And that was the funny thing, because that was the height of the prejudice against the Japanese, is of course during the wartime, you know, and so on. So, like, when Katie was graduating, they couldn't get a job. And, you know, they were graduating as to be teachers. And, there was an edict that came out that no Japanese would be hired as teachers in our public schools.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no Japanese teachers in the public schools, and so she got a job working for the dean of sociology or something up at the U, and that was really a break for her, because the professor was he was a real go-getter and kind of a leader in the faculty and stuff like that, and maybe not the best liked guy, but he was pretty sharp and so that's how Katie got started, and she worked as a secretary because she couldn't get a job right away. But
interesting.
After about a year, she was able to get a job, and so she went to work for Stewart School.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you've been very kind to. It's been over an hour, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I think if you don't mind, I'll come back, another time soon, and talk to you about the basketball stuff. And the other thing I don't know much about is your time in the service. You know, you went back to Japan and did interviewing and stuff, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that.